Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Philadelphia Jazz Organist, composer, and educator, Mr. Lucas Brown. He reached out to Neon Jazz, and we caught wind of his 2019 CD called Skyviews. It's a great listen, and he talked about it. Lucas was born, raised, and now living in the land of Coltrane in Philadelphia. He actively performs both jazz and classical music and has performed around the U.S. and has been at Carnegie Hall, the Kimmel Center, the Jazz Standard, and the Blue Note, and even in Europe and Asia. He is also a member of the faculty at the Temple University College of Music, and over the years he has performed with the greats like Pat Martino, Eric Alexander, Terell Stafford, and he's been a sideman. So get to know him and dig this interview, my friends.
Anyway, we should be serious and acknowledge the fact that that is the land of Coltrane, and you guys do have a very rich music history up there with jazz, so, especially with the organ. But Lucas, thank you for reaching out. Thank you for taking a minute. I appreciate it. And thank you for sending over Skyviews.
Of course. My pleasure. Thanks for taking the time to check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And this was a commission piece. So talk to me about how this recording came about and how you feel about it.
So basically we had this performance set up through the Kimmel Center. So it was just a feature for new music. And it was just my group performing that in evening length program. So I wrote this suite, and we had a great evening. The crowd was amazing, and I was really, pleased with the way the music came together, the band. It was a great opportunity to have a larger ensemble, since this is for, septet. There's not a lot of, just regular gigs around town where I have the bread or the means to bring in a band that big. So I wanted to capture it on recording and try and do something with that, make a record out of it rather than just have the show and then it kind of be gone.
So you're clearly from Philadelphia. Talk to me a little bit about, growing up, how you got involved with music and, kind of some early influences that you had jazz-wise.
I started playing the piano when I was very young. Around 5 years old, I think. Both of my older sisters were taking lessons, and so I showed some interest, and my parents were like, oh, well, we might as well start him if he's already seems curious about it. So that was really fortunate for me. My mom played the piano just, amateurly for fun, and she liked to sing. So, there aren't any professional musicians in my house, but my parents listened to a lot of classical music too. And when I was a kid, I remember being exposed to like the high school jazz band and really being excited to do that as soon as I got old enough. So once I got to 7th grade, I was like immediately I need to join jazz band. Like that was just, I don't know, I was dying to do it. Whatever. It's funny to think back about it now because it was so long ago, but that was really on my radar at that point. So that was my first sort of, just getting my toe into the water. And then when I was in high school, I was getting more into it. And there's a local music school in Philadelphia called Settlement Music School, and they have about maybe 5 branches around the city. And they had a small jazz combo. And at the time, it was run by a saxophonist named Rob Landon. A lot of you guys might know his brother, Byron Landon, who's the great drummer, played and recorded with Joey DiFrancesco, obviously, for years, and many others. Anyway, Rob was running that ensemble, and so I got into that, and that really exposed me to the really small group, sort of hard bop Philadelphia thing. We would play like Jazz Messengers tunes and even some, a little later era, like, some 70s, 80s, like Bobby Watson, Tony Williams, that kind of stuff.
Was it always going to be music for you? Was that kind of your dream to become a jazz musician?
Once I would say, once I was in high school, that was really my thing. At that point, I was pretty much set on it. Because I was really, even before I got into jazz, like when I was in junior high and I was playing guitar too, like I had a rock band and I did that thing and I was like, into classic rock and learning Hendrix tunes by ear and stuff. So, it was always really a big part of my life, and definitely one of my main interests. I think once I discovered jazz, then it really, took over altogether. And meeting people like Rob, seeing professionals, like, okay, this is like a thing people can do in this city. Like, I don't want to say career path, because that sounds very like economical about it, but it is a life that's there. I had seeing actual models and role models and having people to look up to was a big help and a moment, I think, for me.
You've been around and played with, Pat Martino, Eric Alexander, Terell Stafford. You've been around some big shots and some big names in the world of jazz. What have you learned from people like this, from veterans or from mentors, that's really stuck with you?
I spent a lot of years playing with Bootsy Barnes, who maybe not everyone out of Philadelphia knows, but Bootsy played with Don Patterson and Jimmy Smith, and he's, I guess he's like 82 or 83 now. So at Philly Joe, he was in Philly Joe's band, and so like playing with sort of guys that are connected right to that era. Like he grew up with Jimmy Heath and and Hank Mobley and all these people that were in Philadelphia, Lee Morgan, like being connected with that. And not necessarily like from things that they would say to me, but, I was blessed to play with him, and we had a regular weekly gig for the first, 7 years that I was with him in the early 2000s. And just, his curiosity about the music, for one, like always wanting to learn new tunes, just the level of playing, like absorbing the vocabulary, certainly to play with someone who had played with all the great organists, even though he wasn't an organist, was really helpful for me, because, I learned about my role and also, checked out recordings based on things like, Don would do blah, blah, blah on this tune. And so I'd be like, I better go check out really deeply what Don did on that tune. So, because he wanted me to do it a certain way, Bootsy did. I mean, so it's a direct line really to so much of the history, and like a mentorship thing was really crucial. Like, even though I studied music at Temple as an undergrad, I would say I learned just as much, if not more, on the bandstand after I graduated, from playing with people like Bootsy and guys from that generation. Mickey Roker is another great example of someone here in Philly. Like, not just, hanging with Mickey was always great because he was the sweetest guy, but, hearing him play and having that influence around you, and the history, it's not just like people tell you about it, like you're looking at it and being surrounded by it. It's a blessing to be from Philadelphia.
What was one of the first live jazz shows you saw?
Good question. I remember checking out Jimmy Bruno. Do you know who Jimmy is?
I've heard the name, yeah.
Okay, yeah, he's a guitar player from Philadelphia, and I remember seeing him when I was still a teenager, because he's from Philly, and he played at a club around here regularly at the time. And I was playing guitar. I played guitar too, and so I was like really into guitar at that point. It was before I really got serious about organ. So I remember that. It's a good question. The group I was telling you about earlier with the Settlement Music School, we played and sort of, let me say opened up in air quotes. We played a set before Joey DeFrancesco's trio played. And that was really like a huge moment for me, because I never heard organ live. That really was what hit me. Like this, that's kind of made me make a little bit of a turn, because I was still playing a lot of guitar, and I heard that, and I was like, oh my God, like this organ thing, it just spoke to me. That was a really a great moment. I was maybe 15 or 16, I'm going to say, maybe.
So why do you love jazz?
That's a deep question. I mean, the music makes you feel a certain way, for sure. Like the element of groove and dance sensibility is really something that appeals to me. I also play classical music, so, I definitely have a lot of different itches that I like to scratch, as it were, musically, but jazz contains like all of these things that I love. It has beautiful harmony. It has also has really kind of intense moments that kind of grind of, polyrhythm and things that seem like they're at odds with each other, but somehow work together. And actually just playing the music, with other people, like the community experience is really important to me. And one of my favorite things, just having a dialogue, I'm not one to just get up and it's about what I'm playing and kind of let the band be a play along behind me. I really want to have a conversation and share and listen to one another. I love being an accompanist just as much as I do, a feature player. So playing piano, organ, guitar, instruments behind horn players or vocalists, I love that aspect of it too. Just being able to listen and how can I support the other musicians and make everything, come together and that experience that the listener gets from that. It can be a very joyous music, and it can also be really, blues and kind of letting out all of that daily life kind of stuff.
So everything's going to come down to this. Everyone has a perception of who they think you are, your family, your friends, your fans, but you know yourself best. Who do you think you are?
Wow. Joe, that's a really deep question to ask. Oh man, it's complex. Just not even as a musician, I definitely am a person that the world around me is important to me. I care about people less fortunate and very passionate about justice and certainly not just this country, but just the state of the world and the environment. And these things are all really important to me. And, as an artist, I'm blessed to be able to maybe share how I feel through music, but also I don't necessarily always write overly programmatic things, but I can. That I do have a mouthpiece to do that. So as much as I'm expressing myself, I also like to be a person who can share what I think is important to the world. Share that with other people and give a voice to maybe those who don't have one.
Lucas, hey, thank you for taking a minute out. Thank you for the album. I appreciate it, man.
Well, thank you, Joe. I really appreciate you, and thanks for checking out the record. And I hope whoever hears it enjoys what they heard and reaches out to me. I can be found on all the typical social media channels on my website and stuff like that. So. Thank you.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest cats in Philadelphia, New York City, Kansas City, and spots all over the globe, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Lucas for reaching out for his music and his stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. And for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.